It's still with Morning Live. Thanks so much for tuning in. Now, there's been two high-profile arrests in the Northwest Province last month. Suspended head of the Health Department, Thabo Lekalakala, was arrested for fraud. He appeared in court and was granted 20,000 rand bail. And then the former Northwest Finance MEC, Wendy also appeared in court on fraud charges and was also granted 20,000 rand bail. Now, some believe that this is part of a cleanup campaign by law enforcement authorities after the Northwest Province was placed under administration of central government. And Professor Rhulani Hanyane from the Northwest University is here to update us on the current state of affairs in the Northwest Province, and also to make us understand perhaps a little better what strides have been made since the province was placed under administration. Professor, thanks so much for your time this morning.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, first and foremost, what is new in the Northwest Province?
I wish there was something exciting. There isn't, sadly. And it speaks to issues of corruption. It speaks to issues of maladministration. It speaks to issues of maleficence. It speaks to issues of a political system, by and large, that is not working and of benefit to the people of the Northwest.
So we talk now about true high-profile arrests, and some would say, well, there is a good thing in that people are now being held accountable, or at least that's their perception that's created. Others would say, really? Two people, given all the malfeasance and the corruption that has gone on in the province? What's your take on that?
Well, let me be sympathetic to the narrative that says the wheels of the law are slow to turn. And it will be interesting if we were to wake up one day and we realize that the administrative echelons of that particular province are clean, and we're in the process, obviously, of restoring confidence of the people, and issues of poor service delivery, amongst other few issues, are a thing of the past. Unfortunately, that is not the case. For a number of reasons, one would argue. Is it because of political interference? Is it because of the general lack of political will to address some of these issues? Or is it because we come from, and in my humble opinion, 9 years of a political mess in this country? And so no province has been spared of that national quagmire that we had to go through. However, going forward, one would anticipate that the somewhat calmer atmosphere prevailing currently would usher in a new approach, new perspective, and of course a strong political sense of leadership in ensuring that we bring calm, prosperity and stability in that part of the country.
So what makes you positive about the latter?
The confidence of the people generally. It might be a condition right now in a situation where people are not necessarily in charge of their rightful place in society, including in the Northwest, where they can demand accountability, they can demand transparency, and of course, where needs be, they could take certain affected individuals to any court of law as a point of a response to whatever maladministration and mishap. But again, this is how democracies work. It's slow sometimes to get answers. However, one would still have confidence in our civil society organizations, including universities, by and large, to demand good governance in all facets of public life. How this can be done, one can speak of programs, one can speak of a well-structured socio-political initiative, not only through violent protest means, but through proper political engagements. And this culture, I would argue, needs to be there.
Are we not taking a lot for granted in that regard? Because I'm reminded of an earlier conversation with Advocate Thuli Madonsela, once again talking about our failure as a nation to make good on our promises to ourselves via our constitution of what we deserve as a nation. And when we talk about people demanding accountability, when we talk about people standing up for their rights, are people really in a position to do that? And if not, why not?
Well, look, I think the greatest mistake we've done post-1994 is not to conscientize our people. It's not to educate our people in matters of civic priorities en masse. It could be proper basic education in politics. It could be any other area where knowledge and dissemination of that particular knowledge to the benefit of society is entrenched. We failed to do that. We were so hastened and quick to talk about issues of empowerment. And here we are today, we're beginning to realize that issues of human rights, for instance, are still a thorny issue. Issues of accepting that women today also have an equal position in a society that sadly is marred with issues of patriarchy and all other social ills. So in a sense, we cannot, on the other hand, put it to government and blame government. I think it takes the collective, it takes civil society, it takes every other social organization in our social strata to come on board and say, how then do we take the responsibility of social conscientization of our people forward? Educational system should play a role, both at a basic level and, of course, at the university level.
And while I take that point, where you say that we need to take and assume collective responsibility as a nation, I have to disagree with you on saying we cannot blame government. We have to blame government. Who is it that is responsible for the looting of state coffers? It's not the man on the street. Yes, the man on the street may have some culpability in perhaps destroying state property, in perhaps not playing their part in as far as paying for services, etc., etc. But I would tend to disagree with you that we cannot hold government accountable here and responsible for where we find ourselves.
Let me put my position in perspective once again. If we say we have a democratic South Africa, what are we saying? We're saying power rests with the people. And
but does it?
It is. The question is, do people assume, understand, and apply the power that they have? Is it because we live in a state where propaganda could be the de rigueur way of life? Or is it that we have some kind of civic apathy which unfortunately does not allow citizens to take their rightful place in society?
Is it civic apathy? Because I'm reminded of that report, I think it was by CSVIR, who came up with this report, and it was titled The Smoke That Calls. And it seems as though, at least from this report, government only responds when people burn things. People try to engage, they are not heeded, their calls are not heeded, their cries are not heeded. But once things burn, that is when everybody shows up. So is it really apathy on the part of ordinary citizens?
I would counter your argument by saying, but at the same time, do we not have proper channels of engagement?
Do we?
We do.
What are those channels?
What are those channels? Do we use media platforms such as the SABC to engage government? Do we actually knock at the door of our bureaucrats and our technocrats and make proper submissions? Let's take the example of passing of budgets in municipalities. How many of us are actually prompted to look at draft budgets prior to approval of those budgets? So the question is here a sense of civic responsibility on the part of ordinary citizens? Be that as it may, that you have a situation where some of our folks are not educated on matters of politics and administration generally. But then, if I have to take the argument forward, I would simply argue, look, have we done a bit of work when it comes to constitutional education? Do we tell our people that as much as we have Chapter 2 of the Constitution, Section 36 says there's limitations to rights that people should enjoy? So these for me are some of the intricacies and nuances that we need to attend to, and less so put blame on those who are in government. After all, we chose to elect them in those positions of authority.
So this lack of civic education, if we look at what's happening in the Northwest, for example, and a province that's literally been brought to its knees, you have several departments, and it started off being placed under administration. You have municipalities. There's quite a bit of malfeasance and corruption again that brings you to that point where you now have a province that is by and large under administration. But what has that yielded for the people of the Northwest province? What do they have to take from that?
One, violence doesn't work. We've seen this in the protest in Mahike, where public property was destroyed. Now the question should be asked, how do we get back and ensure that such property is replaced? Sadly, it will take the taxpayers' money and contribution to replace that.
Correct.
Which in a sense, it's an unfortunate situation, and it reflects the psyche that is there in the public domain in this country.
And the frustration.
And the frustrations by and large, and I agree with that. But again, let me go back to the earlier point that I dealt with. Do we give power necessarily to people to speak out? And if not, do we again balance that against demanding, as you rightly put it earlier on, good governance through transparency, through accountability, and of course making sure that right people are put in key strategic positions, which takes us full circle. And we need to ask questions. Are certain decisions done at all times in the interest of the public? All these issues remain a public priority, and it does influence how people behave.
Now, when we talk about putting people at the center and making them a priority, we look at the political machinations at play here. And we see those playing out very publicly. And from that, it is evident that this is not about the people. This is about the political elite and those who find themselves in other positions of power who are playing the hands they are dealt, and the public basically have to sit there and get what's coming to them.
And we shouldn't be surprised that we wake up today, we're dealing with the anomaly of state capture. That reflects the kind of a mistimed, misplaced political moral compass that by and large set the elite that you're talking about in key strategic positions to actually put the finger in the cookie jar. And that is a sad state of affairs. In the end, who pays the price? It's the normal people on the ground who must make sure that in a way, as they contribute taxes, sadly, that money does not go towards improving service delivery. Instead, it goes towards fixing an economy that is ailing, at a time when, on the other hand, service delivery is neither here nor there. So we live in trying times. We live in times where issues of governance are at stake. Issues of governance are taken to court, if I may phrase that very carefully, at the behest of leaders, unfortunately putting those who are supposed to be at the receiving end here in a proper way through service delivery at a negative position.
Again, going back to one of the first questions, so we see Wendy Nelson and Thabo Lekalakala being arrested. We know the SIU has been doing work in the Northwest Province. We know the Hawks have been also doing some work. I ask again, two people. Are you still
satisfied,
leaning towards your first answer in this regard?
I am. Yes, I'd like to see the wheels of law turning quickly. But at the same time, if you look at principles of jurisprudence, you may also have evidence against certain individuals. We live in a country where human rights culture permeates throughout. It's important we listen to the other side of the story and, of course, observe the letter of the law to its fullest.
But you know, they say justice delayed is justice denied.
Okay.
It cannot be that over all these years, when you look at what has gone wrong in the Northwest Province to the point of the province being placed under administration, that this is all we have to show.
And did it have to take so much time for SARS, for NPA to be a partner to the State Capture Commission when a credible body of evidence is presented before us that speaks to malfeasance, that speaks to maladministration? Why wasn't these agencies given enough space and opportunity by and large to engage where there's a mishap of sorts from a legal point of view?
Why do they need space? Shouldn't they just go in and do their job, especially, as you say, if credible evidence is placed before them?
Space in the sense that one would listen to the narrative that suggests that the NPA itself was also captured. We can't run away from that reality, can we? And here we are. Space is needed to put in place some kind of business re-engineering of that agency. Make sure that there is good staff morale. Make sure that we keep in place all those experienced individuals. And of course, close the back door of private prosecution. Because in the end, the mandate of the NPA is somewhat compromised if they themselves do not prosecute and follow up certain cases.
Professor Rhulani Hanyane from the Northwest University updating us and talking to some of the current state of affairs in the Northwest Province, what has happened since the province came under administration and current developments there. Well, that brings us up to 8 o'clock, time for the latest news with Leanne.